Vice President Dr. Bharrat Jagdeo, representative from the Office of the Vice Chancellor at the University of Guyana, Head of Department of Economics at the University of Guyana, Dr. Sidney Armstrong, distinguished lecturers in the Economics Department, members of the University of Guyana Economics Society, UGES, and fellow students of the University of Guyana, schools who are here with us, other distinguished persons, good afternoon. Welcome to the first of many interactive forums that will be hosted by the University of Guyana Economic Society. These forums are designed to connect theory with practice, providing students a platform to engage with professionals shaping our economic future. Today's session is being held under the theme Building a Sustainable and Inclusive Economy, the Role of Youth and Innovation in Guyana's Future. This theme is timely and important as Guyana undergoes rapid transformation, making it critical for young people like us to understand how we can shape a more inclusive, forward-thinking looking economic future. To officially begin this afternoon's proceedings, we now invite President of the Economic Society, my dear friend and brother, Amal Kadir, to deliver remarks.
Chairman of the event, our guest of honor and Vice President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, Dr. Bharrat Jagdeo, former Minister of Finance, Mr. Sesnarayan Kaulasar, Head of the Economics Department, Dr. Sidney Armstrong, special invitees, distinguished members of the Economic Society, and all our esteemed guests joining us. Good afternoon and a warm welcome to you all. The University of Guyana Economic Society is an academic and social organization dedicated to fostering academic excellence and leadership among economic students. We are also committed to building meaningful engagement with national stakeholders in pursuit of this mission captured in our motto, nurturing future leaders, promoting economic development. It is truly an honor to serve as President of the Economic Society. This event comes as a product of our current discussion guest lecture series initiative, which aims to provide a platform for students, researchers, and policymakers to deepen their understanding of economic trends, policies, and challenges specific to Guyana, to offer researchers in the field an opportunity to share their researches or contributions to the field, and finally, to serve as a motivation for prospective and current economic students. In other words, there will be many more like this under this initiative with specific focus. As of now, I'm able to confirm that the next one will be a guest lecture centered around trade, development, and policy. In a week or two from now, this initiative isn't just about presentations, it's about dialogue, because from dialogue comes understanding, and from understanding comes ideas, and from ideas comes the very policies that shape nations. Thanks to our dear Vice President, we are proud to inaugurate this series with an event of such significance and prestige. Moreover, it is an opportunity for our fellow youths present here today to gain insights into questions they may have, to engage directly with the Vice President himself, and to be inspired to drive meaningful change. On behalf of the Economic Society, I congratulate the Government of Guyana for their commendable achievements and efforts, in which, as a result, every segment of our society today is able to claim benefit. Just as we are obligated to critique shortcomings, we must also be fair in acknowledging progress. Progress in Guyana's case, without doubt. And this has come as a result of something easier said than done, keeping their promises and staying steadfast. When we heard about these promises in 2020, they were deemed ambitious, 20,000 scholarships, 50,000 house lots. But today we see that balance between ambition and reality, with efforts to ensure the initiatives are tailored to Guyana's economic, social, and political landscape. In closing, I would like to take a moment to express our deepest appreciation to our esteemed guest of honor. His unwavering commitment to public service and his dedication to the betterment of our nation have been evident throughout his career. From his tenure as Minister of Finance to serving as President, Dr. Jagdeo has led Guyana through some of its most challenging times. But what prevailed was a nation on a path of development and progress. We extend our sincere gratitude for his continuous leadership and for graciously supporting this event. With that said, enjoy the rest of the proceedings and back to the chair.
And I know he has a very innovative team behind him, leading him and ensuring that this event and more of this event is executed. And so I think I just want to give, if you can give Mr. Kadir a round of applause for executing this. Now, my brief remark is in two parts here. First, I want to talk about what we're doing at the University of Guyana. And then secondly, I just want to set the context based on the theme. We are excited. We are excited to have, in fact, boast one of the most active student society at the University of Guyana. And this event is testimony to this. We have a bunch of diverse students working together, solving issues, coming up with solutions to some of the challenges that we face, and sharing some of our core principles, principles of collegiality, principles of respect, principle of tolerance. So we are excited to have such a bunch of students really pushing the department. In fact, they bridge the gap between us as lecturers and administrators and the students, and they've been doing a commendable job thus far. In the Department of Economics, in terms of research, we have been able to recently publish a new book at the department looking at the economic challenges of Guyana's 21st century post-colonial experience. Today, I've recently have acceptance of one of my paper that was published in the International Journal of Development Research titled How Social Inequality Affects Sustainable Development. There's a second book that our department is working on. So in terms of research, we have our hands very full. The department offers about 4 programs, elite programs, 2 at the undergrad level, the Bachelor's in Economics and the Bachelor's in Business Economics, and then we have the 2 master's degree. I think I would like to thank the government again for its commitment towards making education, I would say, affordable. The reason why I say that is because over the last couple of weeks, we've seen a significant increase in our application for our program. And I think this is largely as a result of making education affordable at the University of Guyana. I think we can give the government a round of applause for that. And so we have been doing our bit at the University of Guyana and will continue. Now, making my remarks brief again, heading into the second component, which is based on the theme, building a sustainable and inclusive economy, the roles of youth and innovation in Guyana's future. I think I would like to go a little back, 1987. The World Commission on Environment and Development published a report titled Our Common Future. In the report, they list 2 of the most important challenges that we're facing as a global community, which was the increasing poverty situation and the looming environmental crisis. And the Commission argued that to address these problems requires a sustainable development approach, to which they define as development that meets the needs of the current generation without compromising the future generation from meeting their needs. Again, our common economy. If you fast tracked a little to the year 2000, we had the Millennium Development Goals, the 8 Millennium Development Goals to which countries around the world agreed to. And I'm mentioning this because in the declaration, there's a part that states that, and this is from the United Nations leader, we have a responsibility to uphold the principles of human dignity, equity, and equality. It is our duty, therefore, as leaders, to ensure that the people of the world are protected. So, in essence, when they talk about the people, they include the vulnerable groups, and the vulnerable groups being our youth. And I say this based on our theme. Again, the role of youth within development. And then we had the Sustainable Development Goals in 2015. And one key goal happens to be goal number 10, which is reduced inequality within and across countries. And the reason why that becomes important, because it speaks to inequality both in opportunities as well as in outcomes. So again, the youth being the focus of said goal. And so it brings us, therefore, in terms of us, where we are as a nation. So the world, we have a history of showing support for certain big global challenges. Our country, Guyana, over the last few years, have experienced rapid economic growth. In fact, it's unprecedented. Nowhere, if you check the history in the world, you can find another country that has grown significantly as us. This growth has led to massive transformation, especially in infrastructure and transportation, and you can see it happening. But the argument is, how do we get individuals, youth, involved? It hurts me. It hurts me when we open the papers or the social media and we see some youth got caught up in criminal activity. Some youth got caught up in some bad thing. I argue that the basic requirement for development is an educated population, and the youth must be the central focus of such development. And so today, having this conversation about the role of youth in where we are today is necessary and important. More importantly, to have the policymaker here engaging us is even more paramount. And so, making my speech short, I want to ask you to take advantage of this. Put forward your question, put forward your comment. Let me hear from you in terms of how we can take Guyana forward, inclusive of the youth. With that, Mr. Chair, thank you. And I'll offer, again, I can't stay late, but I would say a good session with the discussion with the Vice President. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Armstrong. And we will get right into...
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here to spend a few hours with you talking through things that hopefully are very important to you and our country. So, Mr. Granham has been on my case for a while, comes to these press conferences, and he's been trying to secure a time for this to happen. And I've been very delinquent. And I want to thank him for his persistence, perseverance. Finally, I'm here. So, originally, they had me doing a lecture, and I think that sometimes lectures become too sterile. You can get a lot of the material from just reading what's published. I think a better way of getting to truths, and the truth might be different for different people, is through interaction. But at least we can understand each other and try to hopefully come to common grounds on issues. And one thing about policy is that people can see policy from different perspectives. So they may not have a unified view of policy and policy making. So I did not come here really to do a lecture, but just to share a few perspectives, particularly from a policymaker's angle of the challenges you face in transforming our country, achieving the goals that we've set ourselves. And I was pleased that you mentioned about the sustainable development approach and Millennium Development Goal. And I want to be controversial right at the beginning. So we've seen a lot of these declarative statements from international fora. I think it has become an industry for these international groups, particularly the UN and the UN allied agencies, to put out reports and come up with all of these the lofty goals as to what we should aspire to. What they don't do is they don't give countries the resources to achieve those goals. And they do absolutely nothing for the international or to change the international policies to achieve those goals. So for you to achieve all the Sustainable Development Goals, the Millennium Development Goals, you have to have an enabling environment. And if you examine the world trading system, you look at its evolution from the GATT days all the way to the WTO, you would see that it's stacked heavily in favor of the developed world. It has evolved even from the early days when they had special and differential treatment for small countries based on size, to now almost full reciprocity in international trade. I remember speaking on behalf of CARICOM when I was president to President Obama. Hillary Clinton was there. And I said to him, how are you going to help us to change the global trading system to ensure that countries that want to work hard, that they can do so and prosper? How do you expect a country like St. Kitts and Nevis, with 35,000 people, to compete with the United States of America on the same trade terms when in a single building in New York, more people work in that building than the entire population of that country? So clearly there is a room for preferences that do not distort global trade because they're so tiny in terms of volume as a percentage of global trade, but they're important for the developing world. Similarly, if you look at the world's financial system, you would look at resource flows, the IMF and the World Bank and the multilateral agencies. They have these structural adjustment policies that often focus more on stabilization rather than growth. And if you look at the record of their involvement across the world, you would see it's a mixed record, but they're more associated with imposing hardships on countries rather than focusing on development, because their policy prescriptions are designed mainly to achieve balances, either on the trade side or on the fiscal side. And I can enumerate almost all the global systems. So it's one thing to say developing world must do this. They must achieve this high level of education, but then they're losing, they can't get markets for their exports. So they're not earning to invest the money there. And then when they try to get development financing, they have to jump through hoops to get the financing. Take, for example, now, if we borrowed $200 million to resurface the road from Soesdijk to Linden, to upgrade the road because it's in a bad shape. The contract is ongoing. We borrowed from the Islamic Development Bank. No, the African Development Bank. No, that's from the Islamic Development Bank. It's 5.9%, the interest rate. It took us almost 3 or 4 years to get to the stage of first disbursement because of their procedures. We can go now to a private institution and borrow at 4.2% because of the state of our finances. And you can get the funds available nearly immediately. You don't lose 3 years of development time. And so the point I'm making here is that sometimes, whilst recognizing the laws of economics, you can't get away from the laws of economics. Many people think you can do that. you have to also, in your mindset at the national level, be prepared to explore unorthodox approaches, not fall prey to the orthodoxy of international prescriptions. You have to be unorthodox in your approach to economics. And our history in Guyana, particularly in the People's Progressive Party, our history of policy making over a long period has focused a lot on working within the system, but using unorthodox approaches to solving national problems. And I want to trace with you a bit of this. I didn't want to do a lecture, but it's almost sounding as though I'm going in that direction. I wanted this to be more interactive, so I'm gonna truncate. But one thing for especially students of economics, no matter how you try to get away from consequences of bad policies, you have to confront them. Bad policies lead to consequences. They have short-term consequences and long-term consequences. And if you don't have a long enough horizon in analyzing policies, you run away with, you get a ton of confusion. Let me give you an example of this now. When I go to my press conferences, every week people talk about exchange rate depreciation. So I speak about it. I say to them, we're in a very sensitive period where we don't want the rate to appreciate significantly because it could cause the phenomenon of the Dutch disease that we're trying to avoid. It will make a lot of our exports uncompetitive. And we don't want it to depreciate significantly because it can increase costs, right, drive up inflation. So we look at the overall system. So there may be shortages within banks, but when you look at the supply and demand of foreign currency in aggregate, the system is clearing because the central bank looks at it from that perspective. So I see, and we will intervene to ensure that the nominal exchange rate will not depreciate. So there is a whole debate now going on that, oh, Jagdeo should not be looking at this. What matters is the real exchange rate or the real effective exchange rate or the nominal effective exchange rate, all these theoretical terms. And people don't, so those are important variables. You have to examine them, look at the impact of inflation on nominal exchange rate. You have to look at the impact of trade balances and the weight of trade balances on trade. So those are important variables. But an economy doesn't move on real exchange rate or real effective exchange rate in the short run. They have to understand in economics, there's short run and long run. And so in the long run, a rate, if it's overvalued, when you calculate a real effective exchange rate or a real exchange rate, if it's overvalued, in the long run, it moves back to equilibrium. But in the short term, in the short run, everything is dependent on the nominal exchange rate. And we're dealing with the short run now. So I see a lot of the economists, professors, all of them talking about, we should be looking at this and basically calculating real effective exchange rate, which is nonsense really, because 10 persons could calculate it and all 10 get different numbers because it depends on the weight that you assign to different, on the quality of your trade stats. and you can have variable quality. If you look at, like right now with the US, we have different import figures than into Guyana than they have. And it's different by $1 billion. So, just give me my coffee there, please. So, the point I'm making is that long versus short run. And you, as students of economics, you have to see things over longer periods. Because sometimes the variables are important, they move back into equilibrium over time. But policymakers often have to deal with short-run consequences. If we don't address that, now you can have a short-run impact on our exports or a short-term impact on inflation. So we will use the nominal exchange rate and act policy-wise on the basis of the nominal exchange rate. So that's just an example to show longer periods. And now let me go back to ask you to read two documents. I have one downstairs. It's a document that was written in 1990 by a very distinguished Caribbean economist and leader, Alistair McIntyre. He came as part of a Commonwealth team when the country was practically bankrupt. Nobody was lending us any money. The report pointed out about the shrinkage of economic output. In 1990, we were producing, our gross domestic product was 20% less than mid-70s. So we decumulated wealth as a nation for that period. The poverty levels, if you look at the Ramprakash study, was 86%. If you look at it from a nutritional adequacy requirement, it was 86% of our population was below the poverty line as defined in that period. Yeah, get some more coffee from me. And so if you look at it, the report, it said that our debt, stock of outstanding debt was 7 times the value of our exports. And if you look at the arrears on the debt, it was another 4 times the size of our exports. So with the stock of debt and the arrears, that's 11 times the value of our exports. The fiscal deficit had gone over 50%. So every couple of years, if you're borrowing, you're doubling your debt to finance the fiscal deficit, but the government at that time financed it by printing money, so monetary expansion, which again led to high rates of inflation, over 50 to 100% inflation. So that was the starting point. The starting point, bankruptcy. Economic bankruptcy, a country that was insolvent. I'm not going to go through all the details of it. And the starting point in Guyana was also so bad macroeconomic environment, no entrepreneurial class, because for decades the state controlled, dominated economic activities. 80 to 90% of economic activities were done by state institutions, so no domestic entrepreneurial class. In most countries, it's a domestic entrepreneurial class that drives development. We had none. We had to incubate one. That's a starting point. The third area, disrepair. If you read the report, it's interesting reading. You would see that the entire country was the physical and the economic infrastructure, the physical, economic, social infrastructure were all in disrepair. So that was the starting point. Without us solving the problem of the debt overhang, which was 9 times the size of GDP, and us having to use over 100% of revenue to service that debt. There was no viable economic policy, medium term or long term. You couldn't achieve any goal, millennium goal or whatever goal, no goal you couldn't achieve, because you were paying more in debt servicing than you were collecting in revenue for the country. We were bankrupt. When you added public sector wages to the debt servicing, it was the actual debt servicing, it was 114% of revenue. Because 94%, we had scheduled debt servicing was 153% of revenue. After getting the write-off was 94% actual. And then 20% of revenue went to public service wages and salaries. So those two things, you were borrowing to pay debts and wages. Where would you have found money to invest in roads, schools, any infrastructure, sea defenses, whatever else, without incurring more debt? And without, through a sustained period of policy making that most of you are too young to understand, very, very difficult circumstances in those days. Asghar was Minister of Finance at that time, too. Asghar is here. I was the junior minister, then I became, in '95, the minister. And then my entire presidency, that is what we had to contend with. We had to contend with very little money and huge demand from people, high expectations. Until today, we're still trying in economics, particularly behavioral economics. You need to study a bit of that. I think that's where we need much more work being done at the university and other places. But we still have that. So huge expectations, very little resources to meet the expectations. And then a country that had been divided since the colonial period, they deliberately divided our country along racial lines because they did not want us to get independence at the time, and that remained divided through the years of undemocratic rule. But we're now trying to bridge that divide. So that had other consequences of street protests, etc. So country in turmoil, very little resources, and high expectation. And within those three main variables, we built our economic strategy. And we outlined it in several documents. If you want to trace those documents from the National Development Strategy, the Poverty Reduction Strategy, then the Competitiveness Strategy, the Low Carbon Development Strategy. And each of those documents responded to evolving challenges. So when we had to address the impact of climate change, we came up with a new strategy, which is an existential threat. So we came up with a new strategy. So that is how you have to analyze the period that we've been in office, or policy making at the national level. By 2015, pre-oil, our debt had been reduced to the debt to GDP ratio, one of the lowest, well, among the lowest in all of the developed world, and one of the lowest in the entire world. It was about 40-45% of GDP, down from 900%. So that was pre-oil. And our servicing of that debt had plunged from 153% of revenue to about 10%, under 10% of revenue. And this was pre-oil. Today, it's like maybe our debt is about 16% of GDP. So definitely among the lowest in the world. We are using about 6% of revenue to service debt. So when you hear people think, oh, we're borrowing all of this money, you hear this a lot from the opposition. We have some of the lowest debt variables anywhere in the world now, coming down from that unsustainable period. So we're not burdening future generations with repaying that debt. We're not burdening them. That is what we had to work through. That burden that was a legacy bequeathed to us represented lost opportunities for development because we had to take care of it before you could have had any viable economic or sustainable strategy. And so these are some of the important things that when you sit as policymakers, when people go and make a comment on social media, they never look at things with long perspective. So someone goes and says, oh, the debt is high now. And they just say it nonsensically. You have a lot of nonsense that passes off as policy in social media or even from in the parliament. And every week we have to almost in a painstaking way go back over these things. It becomes boring, frankly speaking. I get tired of it. And the boredom shows. But if you're going to capture the minds of people, my big fear is that if we don't speak up enough about it, as boring as it is, then many people in an unsuspecting way, because they don't do their own research, particularly young people, they will actually subscribe and repeat the falsehoods. And then, what will happen? You get caught up in a kind of populist form of policy making. The populist form of policy making where you do things for only today could never lead to a sustainable strategy. Because we've seen around the world, even with countries that are blessed with a lot of resources, how quickly their prosperity dissipates because of bad policy making or just focusing on today. And that's why if you listen to my press conferences on Thursday, every week I go there, Thursday at 2 o'clock, I focus a lot on that. So if you look at everything, often I respond to the criticism of the PPP. I do that as General Secretary of the People's Progressive Party, not as necessarily as Vice President. I respond to what the opposition says. So I always say, look at any comment from the opposition. Have you seen a single policy-making idea about wealth creation? It's all about distribution. So if we say we're giving the children $50,000 per year, which we've done, we've restored that grant, they will say $100,000. If we say we have double old age pension, they will triple it. If we're building something, etc., it's all about spending money. If you calculate all that they have to spend, it's more than all the oil money we have. Because in this year's budget, all the oil money can only fund 37% of the budget. The rest has to come from other sources. And so they focus a lot on distribution of wealth, but to distribute wealth, you have to create it. You have to come up with policies that are enabling growth and development and the expansion of output. And the track record has been abysmal in that regard because in the entire period they've been in office, in the period, McIntyre report shows that after 28 years in office, we are poorer than Haiti. You should read that report. Poorer than Haiti, the poorest country in the hemisphere, from McIntyre, who was a Secretary General of CARICOM, one of the most prominent figures in the world. He was the good officer between Guyana and Venezuela for a long period. And he said we were poorer than Haiti. Now, from being poorer than Haiti, we're probably in a per capita GDP sense, because that's how it's measured. We're probably just under, we're number 2 in the region now. And in a year's time, we will become number 1 in terms of a per capita. But long haul, it doesn't happen overnight. You were fortunate, this generation, that you didn't have to go through the painful period that we've had to remain balanced on. But it means and why did we get there? Because we were living above our means. When you accumulate debt, you're living above your means. That's a simple answer. So, and how do you ensure that you narrow the gap? It's by focusing on output creation. But if all the industries are failing and you still want to spend, then you would have either print money, which creates inflation, or alternatively, you borrow to finance it. And that's what happened by 90, 28 years in government, the PNC was there, and we were poorer than Haiti after 28 years. And then we saw the same thing in the 5 years. So let me give you an example. For example, miners. The miners had high expectations in 2015. They were promised a lot of stuff by APNU. They voted overwhelmingly. Then the miners got an increase in the tributous tax, an increase in the royalty rate, and then they put the VAT on machinery and equipment. So if you buy an excavator, you had to pay $5 million more in taxes. Then if they had to move 2 gallons of gasoline, they had to get a permit for it. Now, mining, you got to move gas into the interior all the time. Then they had to bring these heavy-duty equipment out to get them fitness or something like that. How could you move an excavator out of the interior, bring them out to get fitness? Those 5 policies in a 5-year period by APTU practically choked off the mining sector, or significantly killed the momentum. So your policy making has to encourage output and production. When we got into office, when we built the Marriott, they said, oh, Jagdeo owned the project. Up to now, Glenn Lally, the crazy man, says, I own the hotel. I wish I did. But they said, APNU said they'll turn it into a hospital. They said it was a corrupt. It's one of the most profitable projects there. When I started that as president, most profitable. They were opposed to this building, the CARICOM building, the Berbice Bridge, everything that we built. But that's history. But economic history matters. That's one thing. Economic history matters, and it has not been written as well as the political history of the country. We have a lot that has been written about the political history, but very little about the economic history. So let me give you an example how we were stimulating investment. The first, we got into office COVID. We said the country is shut down. We said we have to reopen the country. We have to have a balanced policy. And we started reopening. And the 35,000 people that had lost their jobs because of the COVID, and those 35,000 before COVID, we said we have to get them back to work. But how are we going to, if we're going to expand the economy, how are we going to get more rooms to ensure tourism grows and to accommodate the new economic buzz that's happening in Guyana? So we put out a notice, and we said, anyone who wants to build a hotel, we'd try to assist with the land. We'll give you a 10 years tax holiday. We'd allow you to repatriate your dividends or even your borrowing without the withholding tax, paying the withholding tax. We had a number of interests. As a result of that, we have 12 new hotels being built now that will employ international hotels that would employ 6,000 people and transform this country. 12 international hotels, from struggling to get one when we had to build it ourselves, the Marriott Hotel, in the bad years when we did not have much money. It's simply ensuring you create the enabling environment for investment growth. And that hotel now, look, if you go to the Marriott, who runs it? It's our people, basically, 90% run, although Marriott has a management contract. 90% of the people in there are our people. And so this is the kind of thing. Creation of and having a policy making sure that you don't fall prey to populist demand. Some people try because they look for votes all the time, so they would not take the tough questions. They would say, oh, we will give you cash grant of $1 billion a year, like Clive Thomas, who was an economist from UGES and all of that, one time suggested we gave each family $5,000 US. This was in 2019. We're not collecting $5,000 US per family from the oil and gas revenue, but we need to distribute it. But when I go around the country, people say, that's a good idea. Why don't you give us the money? They already believe it, that you can do it. But if you do it, you bankrupt the country again. So populism and sustainability don't work. They don't go hand in hand. And you, as young people studying economics, I hope you don't fall prey to this, because too often, and that's part of educating our young people that you spoke of, educating young people, because a lot of their outlook is fashioned through different medium, which is a populist medium like TikTok or Facebook or Instagram. They're there, and the populism all year long, it is king there. So these are just some of the thoughts. I end up speaking for quite a while, right? I planned to just speak for 3 minutes and then get into the interaction, but I just wanted to share a few of these broad thoughts with you. Maybe at some other time we can do a proper lecture and I can address these things in greater detail, because I would like to do that as part of our economic history. I would like to tell the story about how we managed to change the global environment for debt relief. I don't know if you recall, Asghar, I think you had left when we were fighting for multilateral debt relief, and for a long period, and they said there could be no multilateral debt relief because it will create a moral hazard, multilateral debt relief. And then we had the Jubilee 2000 protests in London. I was minister at that time. I think it was 1999 or 2000. Yeah, and they had a G7 meeting there. And the protest was so big, I spoke at a church in Birmingham, and then Tony Blair sent to meet with us. And then at the G7, that's how multilateral debt relief got on the agenda, through the Jubilee 2000 protest that we were a central part of, working with like Ann Pettifor and the others. I don't know if you recall that name. And then when it got to the multilateral level, at the World IMF, they came up with a formula that would have excluded Guyana from debt relief, because they focus on the burden of the debt on exports and the balance of payment, and not on the fiscal. So there are many countries in Africa and around the world that were also excluded, like Cote d'Ivoire was excluded because they had a heavier burden on the fiscal, but not so heavy a burden on the balance of trade. And we then worked with Paul Martin, who became Prime Minister in Canada. He was Minister of Finance from Canada. And George, I think he was the Chancellor of the UK at the Commonwealth Finance Ministers meeting. And we managed to get it there, and we got the French involved because they were interested in Cote d'Ivoire. And we got it changed. Guyana led the advocacy, and they changed the formula to include those countries that were fiscally stressed. But we need to tell the story how we've got this done and how much debt relief we got too as a result of our negotiations and stuff. And there are many, many such stories over that period. It was a tough period for us as a country. And that's why I'm saying the economic history of the country matters. And at some stage, it will be a good topic for you to research and write on, a lot of it. People just go to now when they write about it, they just go and pick up all of these IMF structural adjustment reports and write. That's not. Those are structural adjustment programs. That's not where the real economics is done. So thank you very much for here, and let's take let's deal with the discussions now. As many questions, and on anything, on economics, on politics, on wherever, anything in government or in the PPP. You can ask me anything you wish. There's nothing, corruption, anything you want to talk about. I'm open to talk about anything. You ask, feel free. You can talk whatever. Raise any issue you want to. And if you want me to follow up on anything personally, My staff is here, we can follow up. Give them your name and number, you'll get a call from the office of the president. They would follow up on your issue. Some of you may have still their drain didn't clean and stuff, and you want me to focus on it. I can call Edgil and tell him to go and look at your drain and all of that. The last time I met with the students, they were telling me a bit about a couple of roads, but now most of the roads are being done, so you don't have to worry about that. Thank you very much.
It's our great privilege to be here and have this space where we can share our concerns and also ask questions and get direct feedback. My question is somewhat deviating from the main theme of the discussion so far, which has been economic based, and my concern is more so on the social aspect. Now, while I acknowledge that we have a significant amount of centralized initiatives that target social ills in our country, my question, stemming from that acknowledgement, is whether or not there are plans to establish community-based and sustained programs that target these social ills. Because the reality is a lot of times we have programs that target social ills in communities, but they're done in the form of outreaches. And while outreaches are successful, they cannot compare to sustained programs, such as things that deal with reformation of offenders, things that deal with providing gender-based support for men and women in different areas that they need, even economic empowerment as well. So that's my question to start.
Okay. So that's a very, very important question. There are some things that the government can do well. And I think the government needs to clearly define that role and stick with it. And then create space for other groups in society to deal with other things. So for example, when I was president, we started working in Georgetown. We had a lot of people on the street, living on the street. So we built that facility, the Hugo Chavez Center in Region 5, to move people off the street. And then the night shelter, I met with the young people who were living on the street, lots of kids. And I said to them, if I were to, because they came from families that were broken and many times they don't want to go home, so they're living on the street. I said to them, if we were to put you, I put you in a school where you can stay there. You get all your meals and we take care of your entire education. Will you go there? And they said to me, no, the street nice. Right? So we ended up doing a drop-in center to allow them to come there, get a bath, meal, and then go back on the street because they would run away. They saw this as a government imprisoning them basically by putting them in school. The same thing will happen with the night shelter for homeless people. When we built it out and we allowed the ministry to run it, the ministry staff was going home at 4:30 and the people have to come in at night. So there is a role for the non-governmental organizations to occupy a lot of these social type of services. Yesterday at my press conference, I spoke about two organizations that we supported. When we got into office, there was Blossom Inc. and Child Link that were doing a lot of work, forensic audits with kids who have been abused, etc. We've increased their subvention enormously, so now they can provide those services. We have increased the subvention for legal aid, and now we've expanded it to other regions. So we don't provide it, but we make a subvention available to the agencies that provide the services. The Guyana Society for the Prevention of Cruelty Against Animals, they met with me last year. They had a subvention of $700,000. In this year, it's gone to $15 million. So
there is room for that to happen. I keep saying to the faith-based organizations, the churches, the temples, the mosques, your job is to work. We will support you to do work in the community. So when the young man in a village faces a crossroad, or a young woman too, and they have to make a crucial decision in life, they're confronted with some criminal temptation because the guy on the street trying to get them to sell drug for him. The faith-based leaders, because in every community we have either a church, a temple, or a mosque, or all of them. They should be there, and we're prepared to support their outreach, not to get a government worker to go there. Often they don't work with the same way, the heart. They work more with the head. They want to go home at 4:30 and stuff like that. They're good government workers too, you know. But this is where those types of services and the outreaches that we do is because the PPP remains connected to the ground. We do it as a matter of principle. It allows, the APNU never did any of this. That's why people thought they were aloof. You have to take one time a picture with a cardboard cutout of the president. You don't need that. It is a feedback from us. When I go on an outreach, I understand what level of services. If I depend on the NDC or the RDC to send me a report on what's happening in a backlist or in Enmore or somewhere else, they will sterilize the report to make themselves look good. When I go on the ground and I hear directly from people and they sit there, then there's no filter. There's no filter. And then I can address the question. So it's a feedback mechanism for policymakers. It allows you to keep your ear on the ground. Why do you think in our manifesto for the next 5 years, we already can talk a bit about it, openly about the ideas? Because we know, we've been on the ground, we know what concerns people the most. It's their drains, it's the garbage collection, it's those kinds of things. It's street lights in the community, etc. So I don't see it as a failure of the system. I see it as a check and balance on the local government bodies so that they are more accountable when they have to go in front of the crowd. You ask them to do outreaches, they'll never do it. They're afraid of going to the people. But when you go there and they sit there, people would say, this man he was shouting at me when I went to get this service there. That is how we are approaching services. So definitely more support. Like we want to work more with people living with disability. But they will get subventions and create NGOs. They don't have to necessarily be government, and we'll get the support of the government to ensure that a lot of the services we have can be spread right across our country. That's the approach we want to take. And we've been taking, but sometimes with limited success, but this is the approach we've been utilizing. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Yeah, but you just asked me two conflicting questions there. You said, what are we going to do or contingency for labor shortages? And then on the other hand, people coming in to take up our jobs. Right? So you know they're conflicting. Yeah. Right? So I'll deal with both. I'll deal with both, by the way. Yeah.
Okay, because that's the concern.
Yes, yes. Yeah, no, I understand.
There are a lot of young people who are graduating.
Yes.
Again, and they have raised concerns. Some friends of whom I know have raised concerns that they're not getting jobs in the country. So I just wanted to know what is the government doing to address that? Because I know that the government is doing a lot in terms of young empowerment.
Yes. Okay.
So I just wanted to find out what is that? What are you doing to improve recognition?
So first of all, I was on the Essequibo Coast last week. You know, we're building out the youth arm of the party, so we have about 15,000 persons, young people who join the PYO, people of kids of every race, every religion. That's how we started in the PPP, through the youth arm. And I was on the Essequibo Coast campaigning pre-2020. So when I go to community meetings, I ask, what about the jobs? And almost every second person wanted a job. So I asked how many persons here are looking for a job. That's over 1,000 persons from the coast. There are a couple from the Amerindian areas, but not from the Amerindian communities because they're more along the rivers. How many of you are looking for a job now and haven't found a job? 2 persons. It was revealing to me. So I went to another meeting at Aurora, and the same thing happened. And then in the evening I met with the Chamber of Commerce in Essequibo. And they said to me, we're prepared to build facilities here that even with the Venezuelan influx, and a lot live on Essequibo, a lot of Guyanese too. When I say Venezuelan, a significant part of these are our people who fled Guyana. The same hard economic times when you could go to jail for eating bread. Many of you wouldn't know that. But we went through that in Guyana. You go to jail, you became a criminal if you ate bread. I hope you read that part of our economic history, because a lot of young people don't know that. Or a can of sardine, if they found you with a can of sardine, you're in big trouble. Or even the tin, not even with the content. If you eat it out, you have to bury the can at night. And if they find you with a pot like you're cooking split peas dal, they would fetch it to the police station with your pot as evidence. It was a different era. The people don't believe. So a lot of our people fled to Venezuela, they fled to North America, they fled to Suriname. Other of them are coming back home because of the hardships there now. So we mustn't treat everybody who comes home here as alien. So even with that, they said, we don't have jobs, and we don't have people to work. In Region 4, if you have, all the construction sites are complaining now. They're saying people are showing up on Tuesday, they don't want to work, we're looking for labor, etc. So it depends on what category you're talking about. We have a shortage of plumbers, masons, electricians, all of these. And you've seen it reflected. If you're talking economics, in the higher price you have to pay for a plumber now or an electrician if you call them home, because there are shortages in these areas. That is why outside of the 30,000 scholarships through the GOLD program and making university free, we also did about 20,000 persons who are trained in tech vox skills by Minister Hamilton and the Vindhya Prasad through the WIN program. So to fill that gap, in other regions, it's turning out to be the same. We haven't been able in all the regions to get as many or as much employment as we have in 3 and 4 now. So some of the hinterland regions, but we are faced with labor shortages in many skill areas. Now, some people may not. So if you're in construction or you're a blue-collar job, let's say blue-collar, for want of a better word, you don't have a shortage of opportunities now. You can walk off one construction site and go to another and get a job immediately, and the salary has gone up. If you start transitioning now to white collar, a lot of this is dependent too now on what you study. And this is going to be vital in the future, because if you're an accountant or somebody now in technology or an engineer, then immediately you're mopped up by everyone. Government, the private companies, oil and gas sector, etc. Now, if you study something else, then it becomes slightly harder. And so the choice of career will have to shift to where the opportunities are. In agriculture now, that is why we have laid out our diversification plan for agriculture, but smart agriculture using more technology. Next term, a lot on AI, the digital society, bringing all government services. So
opportunities will grow in those areas because we'll need people to service them. The 12 hospitals we are building, we need 6,000 people to work there. We need maybe another 6,000 to work in the 12 the hotels that are constructed. So we have a hospitality school that Minister Waldron is running now to get people trained for that. So the opportunities are going to abound. At some stage, we'd have to have a formal immigration policy. Right now, so as not to overload the labor market. Like the bridge where the Chinese are building, we allow them to bring in their laborers. Because if they had to wait on our people, you know that big bridge there would take about maybe a long period into the future. Because they have a deadline to finish it before the end of the year. The same way, like some of these roads and stuff, if they have a big project, but they supplement the labor market. In the future, we'd have to have an migration policy. We haven't gotten there as yet. We allow it on an ad hoc basis, but we're going to be full employment, our people. And that is why we are evolving now to, before the mid next year, each Guyanese will get, every Guyanese citizen will get an ID card with biometrics on it that would allow them some preferences, and every foreigner who lives here would have to have another card, but a different color. So they would have, our people will get some additional benefits. So when you come in at the airport, for example, you're swiping in using your card, you don't have to clear immigration once you have the citizen card. And we're going to start having to differentiate and track who's in our country through this card. So this card would be crucial for you to open a bank account. You can't open a bank account without it. You can't get a work permit without it. So if you're in our country, you have to get one of those cards if you're not a citizen. So we can track who is here, and then we can assess how many people we have to allow in more to work on our sites, etc. But never forget that we look for better economic opportunities in other countries when times were hard here. Sometimes our people become so xenophobic. Anytime they see a foreigner here, they're criticizing them. And forget that we fled to Trinidad, Antigua, Barbados, Suriname, US, and we expect, I used to fight with the CARICOM leaders about how they treated our people over there. We can't now treat people badly when they come here because we are more prosperous now. Sometimes our people have short memories and they want to make it political. You know, look at these Chinese or somebody else coming here. When you look at the percentage of them here, tiny. But they make it as a xenophobic kind of approach there. So that's how I'll deal with that. Yes, let's go on.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
All right.
Hey, good to know where you're from too and stuff. Right, yes, all of the people, right? Which?
St. Rosie's High School.
High school, okay, right, good.
Well, I'm not an economics teacher, I teach mathematics.
Okay, no problem. Mathematics is vital too. Vital for everything. For economics.
I have two questions. As a layman in terms of economics, at least from math point of view, I know that 0 is higher than negative. Now, looking at the economic policies that have worked on foreign debt as low as where we are now, is there any objective intention to bring it to 0? That is my first question. The next question is this oil that we are having now. I know our electricity is being managed with oil from somewhere else, not here. And is there any possibility of having our own refinery now or somewhere later? Thank you.
With this 75% of the revenue going to amortize the investment made by the oil and gas companies, we are not going to see the revenue at any great magnitude in the early period of the agreement.
It will come towards the latter part of the agreement. So we anticipate once the cost bank is paid off, you'll see a steep rise in revenue. We have made it clear that at that stage, we have a formula now enshrined in the Natural Resources Fund Act, that a significant part of the revenue will be saved for future generations. We believe at those magnitude that they will remain with the government, we could significantly bring our budget deficit down to near zero, or the budget deficit down to zero, and that's the starting point. Because if the deficit comes to zero and you can accommodate your capital and your recurrent programs, then there is no need to borrow. So it revolves around the fiscal deficit. And what will happen is that when you build a power plant, we are doing the heavy lifting in the early period. If you build a bridge across the Demerara River, you don't need to build it again. When we build the highways, we don't need to build them again. So right now you see a steep increase in our capital expenditure. But in future years, it would fall off. When we complete building all the hospitals by next year, the 12 hospitals, and rehabilitating the others, we don't need that big expenditure in the budget. So our capital expenditure in the budget would fall off. Right now, that's the biggest growth in the budget, the capital expenditure. We are in a big program to build out. We now are building 400 bridges, all the bridges to Lethem across the river in Linden, 4-lane there, here, Berbice Bridge, 4-lane across in Berbice from New Amsterdam all the way to Molson Creek. And we're doing it now and still bringing down our debt in relation to GDP. When those are completed, and they don't have to be on the budget, just imagine what will happen. So that's how I anticipate we'll address that issue. But having zero debt is not a virtue in itself. If you can borrow cheaper than the alternate cost of capital, except if it's from revenue sources, and the return on your investment is higher than the rate at which you borrow, then it's good to borrow. That's how people make money. They borrow, private sector, they go and borrow, they make money, they invest in something, they get a 20% return, and then they pay back the bank a 10% interest, and they make money. So borrowing is not bad by itself. But if you borrow to eat, that's a different problem. Then if you borrow to invest and make money, it's a good thing, right? Because then you create wealth for yourself. And that's what we're trying to instill. If you look at my press conferences again, I focus heavily on what the next term will be like, and a big focus on economic and financial empowerment. I spoke about financial literacy and the instruments we want to put in place so every Guyanese could invest, taking the most lucrative opportunities from a revenue perspective in government and putting them in investment vehicles like bonds or shares, etc. And then underwriting or guaranteeing a return on these investments and allowing people to invest in this, our people, Guyanese, at every level, even putting caps so that people who have small sums of money can also benefit from these returns. So that's one of the things we're working on. Then a development finance bank so that small business could start getting loans at lower interest rates, etc. The reason that was done is when we got in Asgar, we had 8 institutions under COFA and other places when we got into office in the 90s, and all were bankrupt. And we managed to disengage from those institutions without any cost to the Treasury, unlike Jamaica, which added $3 billion nearly of debt to the Treasury because of the financial problems they had. And that, in Jamaica, they had almost 2 decades of lost growth because of having to deal with that debt overhang. So that's very important. But borrowing in itself is not inherently bad. It's how you use the money. The other one is oil. And so right now, you have to maximize your return from the investments for the country. So the reason we were looking at greater flows to Guyana, the agreement that APNU signed stacked it in favor of the companies. So we said, here are a few things we will do without renegotiating the agreement. The first 50 million cubic of gas will come in free. So that will go to a power plant and we'll generate 300, that's under construction, 300 megawatts of power that when completed next year would cut the electricity bill by 50% and generate cooking gas 4 times or 3 times the amount that we're consuming as a country, so we can start exporting. That is one benefit, by getting 50 million cubic of gas free to the site, delivered there, which allows us to do that. The second thing is that we passed the local content law. So they were bringing in companies from Trinidad and all of over the world, French companies to supply food, security services, etc. Under the new law we passed, they can only rent from Guyanese dwelling or offices. It's a huge sum of money. They can only hire transportation services from Guyanese. We don't need foreigners to come in and provide that. Cleaning services, security services, a whole range of things. Last year, it led to about $700 million of business to over 1,000 Guyanese companies that had registered. That's why people are coming back home. People who never wanted to come to Guyana and looking for a passport, they migrated their children, etc. They're all at the passport office now. Because now there's a benefit to doing that, because you can then, if you had a company in New York and it's Guyanese owned, they're coming to register here and they're getting benefits. So clearly on this, our approach is to maximize benefits. We now have a new PSA that would allow us to do that for future development. We're working on a gas project now that will monetize the gas, the associated gas, and some other gas fields that we have to bring benefits to Guyana. So from the refinery perspective, what benefit will that bring to Guyana? We can sell our oil now and we can do pretty well in the global markets. If we had to build a refinery, we went out to tender, a number of people want to build a refinery. There are some challenges. We wanted to do it from a perspective of energy security for Guyana, that we have our refined products here that should you have any problem around the world, we can supply our domestic market. But against that, there are some other trade-offs. Number one is a refinery brings increased emissions. So it changes our emission profile as a country. In the future, when people are paid, like we are paid already for the forest carbon, but when you have to start netting off, it would cost you money. Secondly, we'd have to give all the tax concessions, tax holidays, so there's no revenue to us. Then we'd have to sell our crude to them at probably the same price, Brent, or we're getting a premium on Brent. So those are the negatives. We have to bring more emission, we have to give all the tax benefits, and then it's privately owned. So we don't get any revenue too. So and it's not privately owned by Guyanese, because you need maybe $700 million to $1 billion to build a viable refinery. So we have to examine the pros and cons. This is one thing we do every time we make a policy. That's why we will never implement a policy if we can't defend it. That's how we approach it in the PPP. And so we went through that. Although it sounds popular, why not build your own refinery? When you look at the numbers and the entire situation. So how can we satisfy now our need for energy security without doing that? And that is why we're exploring now the building of these huge storage terminals in Guyana. So you can bring large volumes of refined products and store them here. Because nationally we have maybe a month of storage. So after a month, if you don't get products in, you start running out. So two things that will happen. If we can bring the bigger vessels by dredging and building these big storage facilities, we can cut the purchasing price of our refined products between 20 to 37%. And because the reason why it is higher here, that's the purchasing price, is because they have to bring the fuel in small quantities. There's no economy of scale. And so that is what we're exploring now as an alternative to ensure that, to the refinery, to ensure we have energy security, which would also bring prices down here and a significant benefit to the country. So you would have seen that in the public domain. Sometimes we don't get to explain these things too much at the press conferences because Kaichor will come and ask a stupid question, and then I got to, it pisses me off, and I got to deal with that, and you know. So really, I'm glad that you raised those issues. Thank you. Yes. Yeah, go on. Go on.
Honorable Vice President, good afternoon. Honorable discussion, good afternoon.
Yes.
I saw in Tibet, along with my colleagues here.
Tibet?
My name is Mark Eichel.
Yeah.
I'm part of GCN.
Okay.
Yeah, yes. As someone in Tibet, along with my colleagues here, my question to you is, what skills do you believe are most important for us in technical fields to meet the demands of the current job market?
All right. So in that area, I would think, let me tell you the sectors that we are focusing on in the future. So clearly in the financial side, but so a lot of, when I talk about the growth in financial opportunities, so we are looking to deepen, broaden our financial sector, including the banking system. So introduce technology into banking, to utilize the funds more in the credit unions or create opportunities there. Then the bonds, the bond market growing, the stock exchange growing, people being able to invest directly into instruments, etc. So around financial services, skills around financial services. We're looking to see if the power plants we're building can't work on data processing centers to power AI. We want to use artificial intelligence as a major tool throughout our system. In the education system, we're thinking about its evolution to even create individual tutors for every student in the country. So you do a standardized or series of standardized tests and you feed it, and then what's your name? Malachi. They would say, oh, Malachi is strong in mathematics, but just from the test, but weaker here. I'm going to create a program of studies dedicated only to you, uniquely to you. And that's where education is going. Because right now we do have the teacher to the student ratio is about 12 to 1. One of the lowest in the world. We have about 170-something thousand students in public schools and 15,000 teachers. You wouldn't believe it if you go to the classrooms, but that's the fact. But still, we need a lot of people fall in the crack, or fall between the crack in the school system. So AI, technology, it would be a digital society. So in areas of cybersecurity and providing services to the banks or to the ministry or to the home affairs, where we're digitizing all the functions of home affairs, from prison records to criminal records, the mounting of these cameras across the country. There'd be thousands of them with the software, to do facial recognition software. You see the lie that they told yesterday at the incident, the unfortunate incident with the young lady. But that's, anyhow, let me don't trigger me here. So that is with the death of the young girl. They are just like the camera where they said they had footage, and they were lying. They had no footage of the incident, the police, and I had to call them out on it. They were lying. But that sort of thing where you can, so security services too. So AI would be, or digitization of the society will create a whole range of opportunities in that area. Agriculture and smart agriculture. So it is tissue culture labs, it is the new application of fertilizer, new varieties of crop, weather resistant crops, whole range of services. So I can give you the broad areas where there are going to be massive changes in the country as we seek to diversify. And within those areas, you can find a lot of opportunities. A lot of opportunities. I'm not going to go with the mature ones like oil and gas and all of that. You know those. But those are the new areas I would say focus your attention on. And then entrepreneurship too. You have to think differently. We want our people to own things. Own their own companies and all of that. So that's it. Even as a group, you can get together. I've seen people do this as a group, and then they branch off on their own. So those are the areas I would say focus your studies within those broad areas. Yes, please.
Yeah. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Honorable Vice President. I am Gabriel Burgess, a final year economics student at the university.
Okay.
Drawing on the explanation we were giving with the country moving in the direction of technology, does the government have any plans to encourage the emergence of more public limited companies so that investing may be more seamless and the same companies that will spend their money that will have the active returns? Currently, the Security Council is monitoring the companies that have market share, and currently there are a lot of red tape that will discourage young persons from creating these types of companies. As we develop the country, technology is like an important instrument, as you said before, and it's important that we use it to drive this initiative. So, for instance, like the structure of the NAFTA or the LCS makes it easy for young persons to learn system and create wealth for themselves and their families. Does the government have any plans to move in this direction or anything similar?
Yeah. Well, that's what I've been talking about for several months now, about how the first term we came out of COVID, like these 5 years, the 4.5 years we've been in office, we had to address the decline and change the trajectory. So we are going this way, we change the trajectory back on economic growth, massive infrastructure development, a lot of the mundane things, focusing on the power plants, etc. The next term in office would have to focus on the qualitative issues in people's lives, quality issues, including investments, and that's why I spoke at length at my press conferences about the same point you're making. So, like one time, Mr. Reed, Clifford Reed, spoke about the stock exchange. They're not getting on the exchange. That the shares are not traded, and the prices on their exchange don't reflect the power of the company. And I had to explain to people that the stock exchange is privately owned. People don't know that in Guyana. 99%, even some policymakers, people who sat in Parliament when the law was passed, they didn't even know that the stock exchange is privately owned. In New York, NASDAQ and all these places, they're right, the New York Stock Exchange, they are privately owned. We own the Securities Council, which is the regulatory body. And so then the Stock Exchange said, issued a statement and said, Clifford, the banks didn't want to pay the fee to list on the exchange. They're not on the exchange. So they don't have. The problem with growing a stock exchange here is that we have very few public companies. I don't mean government companies. I mean public company is defined by the number of shareholders you have. So it's a private company, but it could be private or public, but all privately owned. So, and the reason why that happened historically is people don't want, when you're a public company, you're required to meet some transparency, they have some transparency requirements, because you're talking about many small shareholders, that they're unwilling to share that information. On private companies, if you have a private limited liability company, a lot of people can expense everything. They go and meet their girlfriend, they put it as company expense, or something like that. In a public company, you can't do that, right? So that's why they don't want to go to the public company model. So you need that to have a big stock exchange. But then how can government, by creating more opportunities, help the growth of the stock market? And that is what we've been exploring, and that's what we said we'll focus on. So definitely a lot of this will be done. And then if there are hurdles to entrance, there are regulatory hurdles to entrance, then we will adjust those hurdles. And we want to create a system of incentives and disincentives. So if you're a public company, you could probably get a break on maybe your taxes, a little lower taxes than a private company. So maybe that would encourage people to go in that direction. We'd have to explore all the policies. Yeah, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Dr. Jagdeo. I have two questions about the maritime and the offshore.
So where are you from?
My name is Bernard from Russia. I'm a young offshore worker.
Oh, you're an offshore worker. So, okay, all right. So okay.
So, as you may or may not know, offshore workers work on a rotational basis.
Yeah.
So we don't work 365 days a week.
Well, get a second job when you come on here, right? That's it. Get a second job. That's why we said on your second job, now part of your income would be tax-free, because we recognize people like you need to work a second job.
Yeah, but the problem is when you commit an issue to say that if you have to go on a short notice or something like that.
Well then, but that's your thing. You can find a second job. So what do you want, the government to mind you in the next 6 months? I'm just joking, right? When you come on, relax at home, you work in 6 months offshore. So, yeah, sorry, go on, yeah.
The point I wanted to make is that the tax system is catered for civilians that work 365 days a year. The problem is that we only work on a rotation.
No, the tax system is catered. If you work, right, yes. So the thing is that's why we said second jobs, you have part of your income tax-free. And that was in this year's budget. Over time, you work up to $50,000 a month over time, you don't pay taxes. So we can look at it and examine it, but we can't evolve a whole taxation system to meet a few individual needs. But we look at it because we are changing the system to encourage work, but you don't want it to penalize people too. So we'd examine it. But I would say find a job that you can work from home, where you don't have to go out physically, that is flexible enough that would allow you in the 6 months. You don't want to be relaxing at home in the 6 months when you're here. You want to do something.
It's not necessarily 6 months straight. It's like 6 weeks on and then 6 weeks home, 4 weeks on, 4 weeks home.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. So in the 4 weeks off when you're home, that's a month. Then you do something else too. And you have a job that can, maybe your own business that can function without you being there for a while. And when you come back, you have another worker on working on your own business. You have to be creative. That's our people are smart people. They can think through these things. I'm sure you're already doing other things. You're already doing other things, right? What are you doing when you're home? 6 months? You sit at home 6 months? So, well, then what do you do when you come home for 6 months?
Helping the parents and supervising my young sister, children, whatever. Yeah.
Well, then that's good.
No active second employment at the moment.
Okay, all right. You want to work when you come? I'll find a job for you for the 6 months. I will find something for you to do in the 6 months. Can't see tickets.
I can help Mara. Mara needs people like me with the experience.
Yeah, well, then we'll find a work with you. That's precisely what I'm saying. Find another job, right? Yes. So we'll take your name, okay?
The second question: What is the government's plan to facilitate offshore workers voting in the next election?
Oh, that would be GCOM matter. And you know that's not a PPP issue. GCOM runs the elections. We are a participant in the elections. We'd ask them to look into it, but that's a GCOM issue. They deal with that sort of thing.
I've got a question.
Huh?
I have a question.
Okay, you can ask your question too. Not from Starbucks News today, though, right? All right. Okay. All right then. Well, good. Thank you. Good afternoon.
And my question is, in pursuance of wealth, especially from the oil sector, I was wondering what are the government's plans so that the new economic growth that we've already experienced and we will continue to experience doesn't compromise our environmental, social, and political lives.
Okay. All right. Let me take the next one. Economic growth doesn't compromise environmental, social, and political. Okay. Yeah, go ahead. The next person, and then I'll take about 3, and then I'll answer them. Yeah, go on.
My name is Raymond Harwell. I'm a reminder Chinese and former student of UGES.
Oh, okay. So I thought you crashed it as a remigrant here or forum. All right. That's good. That's good enough, right? No. Fine. Go on. Sorry.
Because of yesterday's conference, I was looking at you online, and you mentioned you'll be here. So
okay.
I said it's great to have an interaction with you.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to thank you for your time. Especially, I want to applaud you for bringing us up from the poorest country to one of the richest now, which is why I could leave Canada and the U.S. to come back here. I invested in real estate in Guyana. I'd like to know I must applaud the government housing drive. And thus, that one initiative is making a lot of Guyanese wealthy. What's your future outlook on real estate in Guyana as it pertains to gated communities?
Okay, all right. Yeah.
My name is Aisha Sarzu, and I'm a grade student at Queen's College. And my question to you, due to the previous incident a few days ago, the unfortunate incident whereby the Guyana police force have basically released false information, it's a very simple question.
Okay, well, it's something personal?
No, it's not.
Oh, okay, well then you can go ahead. What info they released?
Right?
You said they released some info?
No, I said
Yesterday.
Oh, on yesterday's event?
Yes, when they released false information.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, my question is not a personal question.
No.
My question was, how would the government plan to invest in the integrity and loyalty to the nation into first responders, not specifically the Guyana police force, but all first responders? We've had many incidents whereby the firefighters and the ambulance, they take a while to respond to citizens, and also the incident previously with the Guyana police force. How would you?
Sure, I got the point, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I'm ready, yeah. And then I'll answer.
My question is, my name is Khadija Bai. I'm an economics student at the University of Guyana. I'm also the UGES current junior vice president. And given the importance of the industrial clusters, I would like to know, in relation to manufacturing industries, what are we looking to develop locally? With the gas to shore project that you mentioned, expecting to reduce our energy costs, how does the government plan to empower local entrepreneurs with the knowledge, skills, and know-how in order to build up our manufacturing sector, especially considering that we have not such a strong manufacturing base, and without also giving the upper hand to our multinational corporations?
All right, let me address these issues. Starting from the last question. So clearly, there are limitations as to what we can do as a country. We can't become a major manufacturing hub to compete with China because of several factors. And the biggest constraining factor in Guyana would be number of people. We have a tight labor market for our people, and often the type of manufacturing that people think of require large numbers of people. So we have to pick the areas carefully. We do have to add value to a lot of what we do in Guyana, so some form of manufacturing, but it has to be based on areas where we have a specific advantage over other countries. So that's the first thing, the choice of the areas and assisting people with choosing those areas. The gas to energy project would reduce energy costs. But we have, if we're going to create a manufacturing sector for a small domestic market, it becomes harder for it to achieve economies of scale. So you want to export some of your products. But the freight rate now is very high because we don't have a deep water harbor, because of our particular geography where we have a shallow sloping continental shelf. The big vessels can't come direct close to our coast, unlike many of the small islands. So that's why next term we are saying we need a large port that can bring in the biggest vessels in the world, that would allow us to act as a economic hub for places like northern Brazil, Suriname, and back into the Caribbean, re-export into the Caribbean, but would also influence heavily our manufacturing competitiveness globally. That's the second thing that we want to do. Then the innovation hubs that if you listen to the press conference, already you've been talking extensively about regionalizing innovation and support hubs to work with the manufacturers, the small businesses, etc. The fourth area is financing. That is, we're going to establish a development bank, basically, or a financial institution. So finances. So these are just some of the ways. We've already started co-investing. Let me give you an example. In the Blackbush Polder area, we're producing a lot of products. So we wanted, the farmers can't get the products all the way to Georgetown, and then the middlemen use up most of the money. By the time the products get to Georgetown, or the produce get to Georgetown, the prices are more than double what the farmers get when it gets to the market. So we built a small building, and then Umami, I don't know, you know the pepper sauce guy and stuff like that? They're now running that show. And they're buying the produce from the farmers. So our investment was co-investing. We built the building, but they're running it now. And so we're prepared to do a lot of that. A lot of the call centers that we're building, 2 in Essequibo, 2 in Berbice, 2 in Region 5, we are building the buildings and then getting people to operate, like what we did in Linden. Even when I was president, we did that. So some co-investing, including in manufacturing sector. So I don't want, it's going to take, if I had to talk about our plans for each of these sectors, it would take me like an hour each, because it's really, we have a lot of in-depth plans for the growth in all of these areas. But we have to be careful about picking the right things too, because if you don't pick the right things, you can't compete. If we start producing tiles, for example, a lot of people want to go and produce tiles. They tell me at the IST, you will get out-competed immediately. Even with a high tariff, tiles coming from Brazil or China would just kill you. And so, major thing. And to get our people involved too. That is why the multilateral companies, you might need them to create some market. So another project I was working on is on the border with Suriname.
The farmers there have about 40,000 acres of land in some crops. And with Gaisuko at Skelton, which was closed by APNU, we have another 26,000 acres. So we want to create an agro-industrial hub there that would see manufacturing and everything for export using the Quarantine River. We may need some foreigners to create the market, but a significant part of the opportunities will go to our people. Like right now, we are willing to move to growing hemp, but we need somebody to process the hemp. We need a company, and we will now find a local company. So sometimes you have to operate in synergy with the foreign companies, but don't let them take advantage of the locals to grow opportunities. The question about integrity and loyalty, it's a point that came up yesterday again at my press conference. People question our commitment, and I said, the commitment, anytime you act unlawfully, we will ensure that you face penalties. So I use the example of Calvin Brutus. When Mr. Brutus was being investigated, Brutus was the second highest in the police force. The opposition said the PPP will never, because he's close to the PP, never have an impartial investigation, etc. We had an investigation done. He faces now over 235 charges. 235 charges. If we could do it at the deputy commissioner level, at the lower end, we will do so too. When the policeman shot the young guy in Golden Grove, and it was like a personal dispute between the police and because over the girlfriend. You had a big protest. The opposition led the protest. We said, let's get the investigation done. It was investigated. The policeman is charged. He's in prison awaiting trial. And secondly, the family went to court. They won compensation of $24 million. The Attorney General was going to appeal it. We said no, give them the money. So you have people like Vulture. Look what happened yesterday. Already the politicians descended and are making it political. For me, I'm just as concerned about what happened here as any other citizen, because I saw a callous behavior on the part of the police. Callous behavior. And misleading the public too. And there will be consequences. So we are going to act. But as I said yesterday, we can do all the professional training, and we have to do that across all the agencies, first responders, policemen, public servants too, to treat people when they come into a government office or their work conscientiously. But a politician can't give a guarantee about any of these things. Because as we're speaking here, any of us are speaking here now, a policeman could be on the road harassing somebody. How would I know about it? I don't condone it. I don't condone this happening. But then they ask me, can you stop it? Or you have to answer for it. We can only promise that when we discover these things, we take condign action against people. But definitely you need more integrity training and that sort of thing. I agree with that. We have to find ways of doing this. That economic growth doesn't compromise environmental concerns. That's why if you read the low carbon development strategy, you would see the balance that we struck between social development, economic growth, environmental integrity for the country. Please read it and you will see. Even with us producing 1.6 million barrels per day, we will still be a carbon negative country. And most of the world is trying to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. We're already there and we're carbon negative. That means we are, if you look at it as a balance sheet, we absorb more or sequester more carbon than we emit into the world. And a ton of carbon in the atmosphere has, whether it's emitted in Australia or Guyana, has the same impact on climate change. So that's important. And if you look at the balance on social side, the economic growth, although we have not had all of the oil revenue is only 37% of the budget I told you earlier. We are now invested, we already made it clear, education would be free. We're expanding all of the access, the social sectors, new schools, smarter schools, a whole range of other support for education. Healthcare, 12 new hospitals costing nearly $700 million US, rehabilitation of all of the others. So that's the social sector balance that we're doing. So please read the LCDS, and you will, I can't go into it in details. It will take me a whole day to talk about this because I love talking about that environmental stuff. And I don't want to go on too long. I'll just bore you. So please read here. And then on the real estate outlook, I see another 10 years more of growth and expansion on the real estate, rapid growth. And after 10 years, we'd start becoming more mature. So that's how I see it. 10 years more of that, because there's still heavy momentum in the economy and big demand now for all sorts of real estate services. But after that, when the economy starts becoming more mature, then that's why we have identified already the 5 new growth poles that would create wealth of the future outside of the oil and gas industry for Guyana, because we're thinking long term. Those were the 4 questions that were asked of me. Yeah, please.
Well, good afternoon, Dr. Jagdeo. My name is I'm a second-year economics student and the current program coordinator of the UGES Economic Society. So, as university students, especially those studying economics, we often observe how in many countries abroad, students are actively involved in critiquing government policies, contributing to public discourse, and conducting research that informs national planning and economic decision-making. So, in this context, universities play a key role in fostering collaboration between academia and public sector. So, what I want to ask is, do you see a way for students, particularly through platforms like our economic society, to engage more directly with government bodies in reviewing or providing feedback on policy proposals? This could be like through internships, student-led research projects, or advisory collaboration that give us hands-on experience, and also allow government to tap into fresh academic perspectives.
Yeah, so this is something that I've always pushed. When I was Minister of Finance, I made an offer to UGES at that time. I said to them, why don't you allow students to come, particularly final year students, and be seconded to the Office of the Budget, Debt Management Unit, the Bank of Guyana, the Accountant General's Department, all of these places. So when they come out of UG, they come out with an idea what the practical world of work looks like. And sometimes it's not based on the theory that they get taught at university. You may go through your whole working life without having to apply any of those theories. So, but the offer was never taken up. And so I don't see a problem with us trying to move back to something like that to get like people exposed. And it could become part of the curriculum. So they have to get a report and maybe part of the testing system in university. So we're all for collaboration and critiquing of government policies. We're very open to people sharing views, even contrary views. what irks me is when people say, I have a contrary view, but they don't have they can't say what it is really, or justify it. And I get a lot of that all the time, like from the opposition. Oh, we don't do that. Don't do that. We have a policy, but we can't put it out in the public domain because the PP will steal it, or somebody would steal. They have a policy, or they will do it when they come into government. It's really asinine. So we don't have a problem with critiquing, and that should be. Academia should hold governments around the world to their toes, and share reasoned critique of government policies so that the policies can be improved. I hope that will happen. I don't know about the environment at UGE. I have not been there in ages, whether it promotes that sort of learning and inquiry, or it's still based on, like I was once encountered with a long time and it turned me off, that it was based more on knowledge of material that were obsolete and will become obsolete shortly, but the exam system was based on the material rather than on more critical thinking sort of pathways. So this is something that I don't know what's happening there now, so I must not comment there too much about it. I've now gone there for a while. Maybe I'd pop in at the campus a bit and see what's going on there too. But this is what we want. Campus must be. I remember in university, like the coffee shop, it used to be robust debates about everything under the sun. Everything under the sun. It's like real. That's how campuses should be. It's a hotbed of ideas and contrary views and all of that. Not, you have to tiptoe around a certain lecturer, because if they see you too much around, you get a bad grade or something like that. You have to challenge people, including the lecturers themselves. We've done that, and it should happen again. This is the period in which, your ideas should blossom. And we want that at the national level. Young people to do that. So, yes, definitely collaboration. We can work towards that with economic company. Yeah, please.
Good afternoon, Honorable Vice President Sir Jagdeo. Good afternoon, everyone. So you would have mentioned earlier that we have plans on expanding the artificial intelligence industry, right? So do you believe that in any way would interfere with the government's plans of expanding employment opportunities for us citizens of Guyana? And if so, does the government have any plans in place to tackle that issue when it arises?
Yeah, so this is a very important issue too. So will the never-ending debate about can AI replace people generally in thinking, and it's going to pose challenges to every sector, not just maybe the least affected would be the people who are constructing things, but in the white-collar workers. So think about a doctor, and just already they do have that. You swallow a small capsule. Now you have to do an endoscopy or a colonoscopy to see if there are cancerous growths in your body, and it's an invasive procedure. But in the future, you'd swallow a small, maybe camera, tiny, and it would be like in a form of a capsule, and it will map the entire system, digestive system, from top to bottom, and do a 3D model of it. So you see if there's polyps or any cancerous growth, etc. Now, that makes obsolete, or well, I don't want to say totally, but because you still need people to interpret results or so, all of those who've been trained in colonoscopy and endoscopy, etc. Internal medicine would change significantly. So it poses a challenge. What do you do with those people now? And how do you re-engage them? But clearly now, it would be easier and less costly for people to do that. It would cost you thousands of US dollars if you do this abroad to do a colonoscopy and endoscopy. You have to go under sedation, all of that sort of thing, and it's dangerous too, because once you go on the sedatives. And so great opportunities, but big challenges. And we have to think about those constantly to see how we retool people. So AI wouldn't be able to do everything under the sun, maybe at some point in the future. And then we could relax at home and just put AI to work for us and robots and everything. And we take, like this man, 6 months vacation at a time, right? So back at home. And so that would be ideal for us to do. If we only have to work 3 hours a month, and then everything else is leisure time for us, and we could deploy technology to work for us and create value and take care of all our health needs and education needs and stuff. Thinking already, is thinking for many of us. Everybody now go to ChatGPT and all the articles being written and newspaper and editorials and everything, and it looks very smart and erudite. But it's a so yes, we have to retool. It will pose a challenge and we have to retool, but I don't think we're at that stage. We still need a lot of physical people to man the digitization that we're focused on. We need. So now, instead of getting a clerk to go and write up a file or a record in the health system, so we're working on a single electronic patient management record system. So now everything you go in public or private sector, your records are there. We can pull it up at any time. It helps to promote greater quality health care, reduces costs. And we would still need people to man that system. So that's where we have to retrain. But it does pose a longer-term challenge, not for Guyana alone, for the entire planet. How do we, because they may replace us, or artificial intelligence would be able to make better decisions than we make. Imagine being able to make a decision on the basis of analyzing all of history's work on economics versus a person who went to university. Imagine you have that knowledge in your head and you are making a decision. The quality of the decision would be better. And that's how AI would operate, on the basis of being trained with all of the textbooks in the world, being able to assess them when they decide on a policy. So it is interesting era to live in. Go ahead. Good. Occupational health and safety.
My question is, we are expected to have our qualifications and then come out experience, because a lot of workplaces will ask for 5 years of experience.
Yes.
At the age of 20, at the age of 20, you
Yeah.
will be 60 at 60.
Yes.
How do we manage to get the experience needed to get these jobs when some of the courses don't offer us, like back in the day, they would offer them, I'm not sure, it's like an internship after your second year, or they want an attachment to different industries that they work. But my program doesn't.
But that is the model. Now that the government is funding the university fully, I think we have to insist that this university, first of all, that the age-old concerns of the students are taken into account. Because there are many, I don't want to tell you what they are, about the marking of papers and the time and all of that stuff. I don't want to get into that. But this is a crucial part of building capacity. What I just said about to the economic students, that attachments and working, if you're being trained by a national university, paid for fully by the government, then we expect the people to come out ready for the job market. And then the internship should be a routine part. The university, in a way, I don't want to be too critical, it's become like routine. They just try to get through programs. Sometimes it's not the quality of the output that matters anymore. It is Just, oh, we did our work, we did the lecture, it's online, people come, we just finished doing the lecture and we're done for the week. And I collect my salary. Where would be the quality of the output? Once I asked when Nigel Harris was the University of the West Indies Vice Chancellor, he distinguished Guyanese. He came to see me at State House, and I asked him for someone that he could help me pick to come to UG to be the Vice Chancellor who will focus on these quality issues. And that's how Professor Carrington came. But then he got swamped by the culture. And his whole purpose was quality output, quality of the output. So I agree with you. At 20, you would not have any experience. You may have to also lower your own expectations. And this is speaking frankly. I want to do that here. Sometimes when people come out of UG, they think, or any university, they think they're the top of the world. You know everything. And when you go into the world of work, sometimes you have to start at a lower level and then grow. They don't want to start at that level. They say, one time some of my staff say, oh, this is not academic, this is not what we're trained for. You have us collecting data. And then I said, all right, write a policy paper on this matter. Nothing happened. Nothing happened. When I came back from university, I worked at state planning for a couple of years. And almost 2 years, I was collecting data. I used to go to the central bank, walk over there, and to Stats Bureau. Collecting data helped me to understand the macroeconomics I was taught in university, because it's the disaggregated data, when aggregated, that gives you macroeconomics, so you understand the nuances of the data available. But if you take a view, I done university, look, I'm not treating, I'm ready for the white-collar job. So that approach too, you got to get into the environment where I'm learning, I'm still learning. At some stage, you will get the requisite experience. So, two things. I agree with you that the university should do more of the attachments, and the government can ensure that we facilitate that. That's one. And two, maybe if you can go in at the higher level in a company, say I'm prepared to come in and learn at a lower pay until I get the experience, a year or so. Well, that's the model that's going to come. Our job is to educate our people, not to educate them and put them in bondage. That's how I see it, not to because of this. This is like old thinking. You got to think about, how could I grow wealthy? Don't think about government. How could I leverage my skill to grow wealthier? Because this bondage thing is when we had scarcity. Nobody wanted to work for government. So the bonding was to tie them to work for the government. Now people are getting the government's job is to give its people an education and the opportunities. Once you have that, don't look to the government, because this is an old-time approach to go and hunt a job for you too. That's why I'm saying what you train on must be appropriate. You got to make decisions. That's how it operates around the world. So mindset changes have to take place at every level, not only at the government, but even at the people requiring training. So a guaranteed job for life. You're in government, you're 20 years old. Okay, right. So you want to next 40 years you'll be working. I want to see you wealthy in the future. Think about how you can marshal your energy, getting a loan from the new agency to start a business, do something of that nature. Selling some safety gears and stuff.
I am an
Okay.
So I do understand the work with somebody, but I just want to know that if you
Yeah.
go through with this free education,
Yeah.
we're not born in any way that okay,
No.
you have to serve here.
No, you don't have to. Once you're in Guyana and you're Guyanese, that's good enough for us. We have to invest in our people. Yes, please.
Honorable Vice President, fellow guests, good afternoon. I'm Mr. Arthur from President's College, Cambridge. So my question this afternoon, I have two questions. How does the government ensure youth from rural communities, mainly the countryside and interior lands, aren't behind in the transition to a sustainable economy? And what is the government doing to have a more green solution to producing electricity for a country that is moving away from burning fossil fuels to using green solutions to have more reliable electricity and export the refined fuel?
So there are several ideas. If you look at our energy mix, apart the gas to energy project will cut our emission profile significantly because we're burning bunker C now. Gas is significantly cleaner. It's not a renewable energy, but it's significantly cleaner. So we can cut the emission by 35-40% of that's the greenhouse gas emissions and still have more power. Secondly, we are expanding the solar network now. We're now putting in about 35 megawatts of solar panel in Linden, Berbice, and Essequibo, and a number of other places. We've just completed two mini waterfalls, the hydro in Region 9 that will generate about 2.2 megawatts of power. We intend to go back to the Amila Fall project, which may generate about 165 to 300 megawatts of power, depending on the scale of the project. So all of that is part of our energy mix. We could eventually take the power from the hydro and probably do green hydrogen, so for export. I don't want to go into details or it'll be very long here today, but definitely that's part of our planning for the future. The youth from rural areas, it's a big issue, even in education. So when talking to the young people on the Essequibo coast, one guy he still has to come to UG. So I've been urging them to use the Gold Scholarship Program because now, if your parents have to pay for you to come to university, you don't live in Region 4, you have to find accommodation and food and all of that. It's costly for people. So us taking the Gold Scholarship was designed to take university into people's homes, university opportunities. We managed to do that along the coast, but in the hinterland communities, the Amerindian communities, and riverine, not just Amerindian, they didn't have access to internet and high speed. So that's why we put in the Starlink program in all of these communities now. So now they can have access. But the guy said, what about those of us who are doing technical subjects? And we need to do labs and stuff like that. So I spoke of it 2 press conferences ago, that in each of the region, we'd have to build now a center for them, if they're doing the technical subjects, to do their labs and everything there, so they don't have to come physically. So this is one of the ways of which you can even out access to education and the costs associated with coming to a physical university. You'll be able to still get a degree there. And because it's hard on the parents to have to find the money to pay to rent a building here and also for food and everything else. So if we're tackling tuition and we're not tackling those issues, then we still wouldn't be able to get widespread access to university education. Those are the kinds of things. And there are lots of other things we're doing now to expand more now investment into, like Region 10
changing the incentive regime. So if you invest in Region 10 or Region 6 or one of the other regions, you get more tax write-offs than having invested in 4, because everybody is investing in 4 now. We have all the hotels going here, etc. So that is to shift more opportunities for jobs of a different nature into these rural and hinterland communities. That's how we're approaching.
Good afternoon, Honorable Vice President.
Good afternoon.
So my name is Steve Lockley, and I'm from Queens College. I must say thank you for this forum. And I come here with 2 questions, both of which will be dissecting certain narratives. So the first one asks, how can we change the deeply integrated or rather poisonous Chinese mindset of scarcity, comfortability, and dependence?
What are the 3? Scarcity?
Yes. Especially given our history and struggle. Do you believe
scarcity, what? Comfortability? Don't give me the 3 buzzwords. Mindset. Comfortability?
And then we're still in that scarcity mindset. And then we also feel like we need to be dependent. It'll come together in a second. So, do you believe that the illiteracy pleasing of this mindset, spreading harmful ideas that prevent critical thinking and self-involvement? Therefore, how can we deviate from the passive attitude of simply accepting outside narratives and instead to the generation that questions, challenges, and understands the full impact of the information they consume? Or does this remain an intrinsic issue whereby contributes to the mass comprehensive discrimination market? And we see this in the way of these things rather react to
Yeah. I'm hoping that you would tell us it's hard, because to change people's mindset, more people would show, a man would post his car and get more engagements on the car than if you talk about, you post something on a policy that will affect their lives now and in the future. They think it's boring. And how it is something that young people have to. So the TikToks and stuff like that and the Instagram have to start, the material that people post and they consume have to be of a different nature. But it will not change by us just saying that. And often they think, oh, it's politicians saying that, but we're not into that sort of thing now. So how do we change people's ideas, first of all? That is why sometimes people think I go after the Starbuck News, and it's a balanced paper. Milton is from the Starbuck News. But they had an editorial called The Cultural Policy of Guyana, and that's why people didn't know why I went after it. I did because it was a good editorial. But it spoke of how do we build a national consciousness that makes us proud of who we are and glorify and recognize our own achievements, because others are not going to do that for us around the world, to build a national consciousness that is positive. And so I said, yeah, it's great. But you yourself, as a newspaper, every day you try to tear this down by making someone else look better than us. They will take an obscure example from some country in the world that is like discriminating against indigenous people and compare it to the changes in the indigenous community here that is unprecedented globally, because they give one organization that is constantly negative, 10 pages in the newspapers, and the 242 elected leaders from the community wouldn't get a single column or a page in the newspaper. That is the kind of thing. So it's the dissemination, the media that disseminates information about the country, they always put a twist to something good. They can't recognize that we are unique people. Our diversity is our strength, that we have come a far way. We've made more progress and we live better together than countries that are racially homogeneous, where everybody is of one race, and we have a better standard of living and we live better together. If you look around the world, you go to examples around the world in Asia or Africa, you would see what I'm talking about. But everything is about race or something else here in Guyana, pulling us down. And that doesn't help to create this national consciousness that is entirely positive. So our people, the only time I see a big fight going on was when some white girl came here and said she's prettier than Guyanese girls, and you had a big fight going on for weeks online. I can't even remember who the person was, right? She said, I'm prettier than all the Guyanese girls. And then our woman came out, in great force. But they should be coming out on like everything else. Look, we're getting hammered for, the president in the Starbuck News editorial is getting hammered for announcing that we're going to pay 8 subjects CXC and CSEC for every citizen in the country. They said, oh, did you study the economics of this, etc. We get hammered for something that is so patently good. And that is a vital thing. But it's people like you who have to change that. Young people like you. That's why I'm spending time here. It's talking about analyzing things in a bigger framework than what you just hear some man saying on the road or somebody posting on TikTok. It is this more nuanced kind of long-term structured analysis that would allow our people to prosper. So it's a good thing that you bring it up, but I don't have all the answers for that one. I don't know how you change people's mindset. You can't tell a young person when they're sitting in their bedroom on Facebook or TikTok what they search for. They'll go and search for pimple removal or something else instead of the spectacle program for kids. They voucher of $17,000 and then they come and say we can't afford the spectacle. They would search for that. So how do you change that? I don't know. You can probably tell me. Okay.
All right. So my second question, this is on a global scale.
Yes.
So with emerging global powers looking to forge deeper ties with resources,
Absolutely. All right. Okay.
how do we maintain political and economic sovereignty without compromising or becoming a pawn in larger geopolitical games? Are we preparing our youth not only to be workers on entrepreneurs, but also critical thinkers who can interpret and question Guyana's position in the global order?
Yeah.
Therefore,
This is.
what does principal diplomacy look like in an era age where alliances often become questioned?
So I think our diplomacy has been laid out for a while. Historically, it focused a lot on keeping our country safe based on territorial threats, etc., which we have to pursue. Then economic diplomacy is a huge part of the new orientation. And then also the soft diplomacy, where which is good for tourism and everything else, our position in the world has grown enormously. And I don't want to list the successes we've had globally, because we've had a lot of successes. We are now a member of the Security Council of the United Nations and all of that, where critical decisions are made. So we've had great success in our diplomacy, in keeping the country safe and on the economic front. The critical thinking is not something that government tells people to do. You can't tell a person, I want you to think critically. It's something that has to start from school. And it questions the model of education from nursery school all the way to university. If a university focuses on giving people notes and sticking to notes now, and they only have to adhere to a small framework, then where are we going? That's where you prepare people for this sort of thing. And that's why, if you listen to us, we moved the budget from $53 billion when we got into office for education. Now it's $185 billion in 2025. In the 5 years the PPA has been there. But now we have to look at, are we getting value for money? And are we achieving that's what we set out to do, the critical thinking. And it may mean reorganizing education fundamentally in the country. So it's a very important thing for us that we have to address now. We're investing the money, but we have to get the output and better quality people. And globally, so this is important. Our place, we're an extremely independent country in our foreign policy over many years. We have a credibility globally. And as I told you, we have good friends too. We make sure we maintain good friendship with countries that are important to us as a people and important to us from a strategic perspective. And so we focus heavily on that, but we also have a unique way of doing things here, solving our own problems. We bristle if we get these orthodox policy prescriptions that are tried everywhere in the world, and people come down here and say, you should do this. So you see, over the week, the big hullabaloo about the US report, the drug report, and they said, oh, the Gordon Mosleys of the world posting that it was a negative report for Guyana. And then I said to people at my press conference, so if they talk about our failures in addressing, like, and blocking all the drugs going up to North America, the cocaine that passes through our country. Last year in the same report, it said we had the biggest seizure anytime in our history. So we are working. We had the biggest seizure. But if you listen to President Bush, he speaks about a fentanyl epidemic, killing millions of people in the U.S. It gets in from Mexico into the U.S. So who has the biggest law enforcement failure in the world? If all of the drugs going into the U.S. gets into the U.S., they have a big failure of law enforcement. And they're well paid. And they have multiple agencies. So it's, how come you're not putting in your report you're the biggest failure of law enforcement in the entire world? And then they said the government of Guyana charged 4 GDF officers for having marijuana. And I'm pleased that we caught the officers and the people smuggling the marijuana and charged them. So it shows our system is working. Now we have to face marijuana being smuggled from the US into Guyana because they have now liberalized the sale and the use of marijuana. So if people love to run down Guyana, like the Mosleys and Travis Chases and all of them, they run down Guyana. But they don't look at that. They don't look at what's happening there. Imagine we're faced with drugs smuggled out of the US in barrel, these potent versions of marijuana sold in the US coming in through barrels into our system. And we still have it on our books as an illegal activity in Guyana. We are taking action and they're shipping the drugs out. But we, as you said, in the world now, people, the developed world always tries to look good. And they had a great civilizing mission. People like us were all uncivilized in the history, and they had to come and civilize us. And some of our own people subscribe to that philosophy, not us in the PPP. We believe we have people in the developing world, in Africa, Asia, Latin America, we can chart our own courses. We're just as smart as anybody in the world. And we don't have a chip on our shoulder. So there are points about them imposing their value system on us. Sometimes it's the Trojan horses in our own midst who are the either intended or unintended conduits for this sort of thing. Right, I take one more because people are getting very tired now. I see that you all look hungry. And I don't stay between people and food at home because I like food myself. Yes, so, right.
My question to you is, how is the government planning to invest in technical trainings in the next few years?
Okay, so massive changes. The best from the tutoring perspective, but equipment and everything else. So you heard what I said, the investment is growing. I spoke earlier about some of the areas that we believe people should branch into. And so in those areas, we have to equip the institutes to do the training in those areas. So if you don't have the policy, the subject being offered now there, we have to make sure that the curriculum starts offering those subjects, the curricula of the technical institutes, but major investments. Go ahead.
Thank you for your questions. I just have 3 ideas, not questions. On the part-time jobs, I know the government is investing a lot in call centers and so one of the things that maybe the government can do is have the call centers do work from home. And you probably have people do part-time jobs at those call centers, like the guy at the back who was wanting a part-time job. Also on the collaboration.
I don't think he wants a call. He wants a big job. He won't go to like start a job or anything like that. He wants to train people at Marriott or something like that. So he's looking for something different. But we definitely we'll explore.
Also on
They'll make notes of all the ideas that came out too. Anyhow, you'd have the video footage, so we'll make notes of all the ideas.
On the collaborations between the UG economic students and the government, we as a society can push for something like that.
Yes, that would be good. No, and I want to thank you for this too. It's a good initiative that the Economic Society did, and I hope that you can do this with others too.
Yeah,
Other sectors. Get the Prime Minister to come and talk about, the disaster preparedness for the country. We are passing a new law. Monday we're tabling it to address oil spills, making the responsibility that of the people who, the perpetrators and a whole range of stuff. So it would be good to have PM come, then the President and everyone else.
And one other thing, at the GPHC, I was speaking to someone last night and she was telling me that she's 86, and at the GPHC, she currently has a pacemaker. And at the GPHC, the machine that they use to test the pacemakers, it's one of the older machines, and the pacemaker that she currently has is a newer, modern one. So the machine that they have only tests the older ones, so she's now forced to.
All right, I will talk to them about that. Make sure have her come and see me.
Okay.
Have her come and see me, and I'll send her to the Minister of Health.
All right, so to close off formally, we want to thank VP for coming here and all of you. To close formally, we now invite Amal to hand it over to VP.
All right. Okay then, all right, thank you. All right, thank you.